All right. Well, we are back to the Book of Kings, and we are in the middle of the chapter 3, and we were studying this beginning years of Shlomo HaMelech's reign over the Jewish people as king. And one of the questions that we were dealing with last week was, I believe Ben mentioned it, and too bad he's not here, but um, it had to do with the fact that it calls Shlomo HaMelech, where Shlomo HaMelech calls himself Nar Kotoinam, a small youth, which we're trying to figure out exactly, how he could say that about himself. Is he really what age is he? We know he's young, but is he really young? At least the word Nar. Um, So the commentaries really debate exactly how old Shlomo HaMelech is at the point where he has this revelation from Hashem, and Hashem asks him, "What would you like?" And instead of asking for great wealth or great honor, he asks that he should be able to judge properly. And so, what age is he during this, which we could call maybe like a dream? The Hebrew word is vehine chaloim, so it does seem to be using a similar term like a dream. Uh, was it? It might have been considered more prophetic. Different commentaries have different terms over here. It was more than just a dream. Maybe it was like a prophecy. Um, but whatever it was, what age was Shlomo HaMelech when he had this? So the simple reading, if you look if you look at the chapter and everything is in chronological order, so what it seems is that this took place after he married the Bas Paroi, the daughter of Pharaoh, and he's basically about to build the Beis Hamikdash. So it seems like it's 4 years after he started his reign. Now, I should mention that in chapter 6, it does begin with um, building the Beis Hamikdash, uh, where he's ready to, he starts building it. And it does say over there clearly that this is the 4th year and the 2nd month of Shlomo HaMelech's reign. So uh, if he became king at 12, so this story is right around this time when he's about to begin building the Beis Hamikdash. And this would be, if you look at it in chronological order, so he must be around 16. Now, the other way of learning this is that maybe it's not exactly in chronological order. And really, this story happened right when he became, shortly after he became king. And if you learn it that way, so it's not exactly chronological, but he became king, even though it mentions that he married the daughter of Pharaoh, and and all these other situations with, it doesn't say clearly what happened first to Shimi ben Gera, and but it does say that Shimi, after 2 years or 3 years, his two servants ran away, and it sounds like this happened after that story of Shimi. But if you want to learn that it's not chronological order, you would learn, and there is reason logically to say that maybe he would have wanted to do that. He would have done this right away. He wanted to go to Givon, which is the main place of bringing sacrifices, which is called the Bama Gedola. It's the official altar. This is the official altar. They were allowed to bring sacrifices on unofficial altars, on personal altars, but this
Africa
was
is going to be coming.
let me mute
That's
everyone.
to Africa.
Which one?
Bringing.
Okay, let me mute everyone. So so if you want to learn this way, so Shlomo HaMelech is 12 years old. He's before bar mitzvah. So he's being called a nar, being called a lad or a youth, and he's before his bar mitzvah. He's king, but he's now going to Givon. And the reason I say logically this would make sense is that would be the appropriate place to go and bring, major sacrifices when he became king. Maybe he's not going to do this always, but at least it would make sense that he became king. He would go there. So that would be a reason to maybe learn that way. And Rashi seems to follow that logic, um, because he says nar katan on this verse that it says he was a young, small youth, a small lad, and he says he was 12 years old. And he makes a whole calculation how old, everything. When was Shlomo born? He was born during the raping of Tamar, where Amnon raped Tamar. That's when the story of Shlomo HaMelech being born is. And then 2 years later, Avshalom kills Amnon. 3 years, Avshalom runs away to his Goyish grandfather, and which is Maacha's father. Then Shlomo HaMelech comes back uh, uh, to Yerushalayim for 2 years, and then he starts his rebellion. So Shlomo HaMelech is now 7. Again, 2 years till Amnon was murdered. 3 years Avshalom was away. That's 5. Shlomo HaMelech is now 5. 2 years later, Avshalom is back in town, and then he starts his rebellion. So during the rebellion of Avshalom, Shlomo HaMelech is 7, and then after the rebellion of Avshalom, there's a famine for 3 years. So now Shlomo HaMelech is 10 years old, and then after that is the counting of the Jewish people, which took 9 months. So Shlomo HaMelech is now 11 years old, and and uh, during the final year, um, David HaMelech, he made a division to 24 different groups, the Mishmaros, the divide the groups of Koyanim into different groups that they would do service in the temple. So that was the final year of David HaMelech. So Shlomo HaMelech is now 12. So David passed away. Shlomo HaMelech now is king at 12 years old. And then that's the way Rashi understands that at this point he goes to Givon. Let me mute everyone again. Not sure how that happened. So at this point, Shlomo HaMelech, he's 12 years old. He goes to Givon, and he davens over there. And that's where he has this revelation where Hashem asks him, Sha'al ma eten lach, ask what I should give you. And Shlomo HaMelech, he doesn't ask for wealth, he doesn't ask for honor, and he asks instead to be able to judge properly and justly. And he wants to understand bein toiv lara, between good and bad, so he could judge. Lishbeidas amcha, leiv shemea, a heart that understands, and lishbeidas amcha lahavin bein toiv lara, to judge your nation, to understand between good and bad, because who could do such a thing? Who could ever judge your nation? Such a complicated thing, and do it properly. And Hashem was very impressed with his answer. And he said, I'm going to give you not only what you asked for, but I will also give you oisher and kavod. And as the verse ends, and I'm going to read it inside, but he also says, if you follow my ways, my commandments, then you will also have long life. Now, does anyone know how long Shlomo HaMelech lived? Yes?
I'll take the moment to introduce Esther. She's
Ah,
joining
okay.
us as a
Hello.
guest.
Hello.
Hi, Esther. Hi, welcome, welcome.
I
Now
used
tell
to
us.
know I used to know how long he lived, but I
Oh, so
forgot.
you don't. Ah, okay.
I
Anyone
forgot.
else? Anyone know how long Shlomo Melech? Shlomo Melech actually lived 52 years. So the question is, what about his long life? And the answer is, he didn't really merit the long life because that was conditional. The other blessings that he was given were unconditional. You follow my ways or you don't follow my ways, you're going to get them. He was wealthy till the end of his life. He did not suffer any poverty at all. He did not. He had covered great honor, and that was unconditional. But the length of days, that was conditional. Longevity, that was conditional, and he did not merit that. And one of the main reason that the one that we know is because he married too many wives, which he was not allowed to. Shmuel also lived 52 years. Yeah, that's true. That is correct. Shlomo and Shmuel, very similar name. Um, okay, now let's read it inside. I'm not exactly sure what verse we got up to last time, but let's begin we're in chapter 3 and verse 10. Let's begin with verse 10, chapter 3, verse 10. And it was good in the eyes of Hashem that Shlomo had requested this thing. God said to him, because you have requested this thing and you have not requested length of days, have not requested riches, have not requested the life of your enemies, in other words, that they should be killed, but you have requested understanding, tapri, and justice. Behold, I have acted in accordance with your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, such that there has never been anyone like you before, nor will anyone like you ever arise. Now, the commentaries, like the Radak mentions, what does it mean, the heart of wisdom and understanding? So the Radak explains it means that the Chacham Hamakayim Es Limudai, it means that he would remember and apply. He would um, um, it was information that was part and parcel of his way of thinking. In other words, he absorbed the information properly, and he was ready to fulfill it, to act upon it. That's the chacham. Chacham is someone who absorbs the wisdom, remembers it. It's mizuman. It's ready. It's right there. It's on the forefront of his mind. That's chacham. Makayim limudai. Whatever he learned stayed in his heart. He kept it. It existed there. And the navoin, the understanding, means that he was able to apply matters that it doesn't say clearly, but he would deduce it from the other thing. So that was the two blessings that he asked for, and that's what he was given. In addition to other blessings, the other blessing, to the extent now these two things, leiv chacham v'navoin, it says there never was before, never will be after. And this, the Radak says, doesn't seem to fit with a Gemara. He doesn't quote the Gemara, but the Gemara that it seems like this is what's bothering the Radak is the Gemara in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah says that it's on page 13. Some of you might remember this because we have our morning class, the Megillah, where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest leader of Klal Yisrael in Torah, in Chachma, and in Nevuah. So it sounds like Moshe was the greatest in wisdom. And this verse says, no one before was ever like Shlomo, and no one after him. Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, was well before Shlomo HaMelech. And this verse seems to say that that no one that you didn't have that Moshe maybe wasn't as great as him wisdom. So the way the Radak answers this question is that he says it depends in what field. Chacham in godly wisdom, Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest. But in worldly matters, Shlomo HaMelech was the greatest. Science and the Chachmas Hateva, that's the term the Radak uses. Wisdom of the Teva, of nature, basically science. And he says, or you might say that what it means is that Shlomo HaMelech amongst kings, there never was someone who was so knowledgeable in Torah like Shlomo, or after him, before him and after him, in kings. But according to this, Moshe was not considered a king, and therefore he was not included in this verse that it says before him or after him, there never was such a king. And that would not include Moshe, because Moshe, according to this way of understanding, Moshe was not considered a king. Which is interesting, something to do a little research on. We know that Yeshua did have was categorized as a melech, as a king. So it would be interesting to know if Moshe, if there is such a discussion, if Moshe Rabbeinu was considered a melech or not. I would think that he would have been considered a king, being in charge of the entire Jewish people. And I believe there are some sources to it, but I don't. But this would be a source the opposite way, that maybe he wasn't a king, and that's at least the way the Radak is explaining it in one of his explanations. And then we have the next verse here. I'm sorry. There were some questions before. Susan, did you want to ask something?
You already touched on my question was about 12 years old and not bar mitzvah yet, and he was going to be a king. That still doesn't. I still don't understand that. No bar mitzvah, king.
Well, you have to understand that even before bar mitzvah, we, amongst the Jewish people, have had some tremendous scholars. And having a bar mitzvah was not necessarily the cutoff point of when someone was fit for a king or not.
I'm not saying fit or unfit. I'm saying that bar mitzvah, you accept God as the only, you are going to act as an adult, even though, in other words, when a boy turns 13, he's accepting all the adult.
Yes.
So you do have your question, if you want to word it a little differently, is a very good question. I think you have to word it a little differently, that if a bar mitzvah,
he wasn't an adult.
What you're saying is, how could he have the maturity,
correct,
to judge the people properly before bar mitzvah, if bar mitzvah is an age of maturity? Now, if you learn that a bar mitzvah is an age that is a commandment that God said, bar mitzvah is when you're obligated in doing things. Before bar mitzvah, you're exempt, but it has nothing to do with maturity. It's sort of like a command from God, which we don't understand. Then we could understand that the king could be before bar mitzvah, because the bar mitzvah doesn't really change anything in maturity. All it is a biblical obligation of the commandments that take effect at a bar mitzvah for no reason logically, simply because that's what God had in mind. That at least no reason logically that we understand. Of course, God has his reasons. But if you want to say that bar mitzvah has to do with being mature, and that's according to Jewish law, the bar mitzvah, 13 years old, is when someone receives his level of das, his ability to realize what's important and be able to decide and decipher between right and wrong and good and bad. and it's a logical age of the age of 13 is based on logic, then you could ask, well, how could someone be a king at a younger age than than the age of bar mitzvah? And I think that's a very valid question. Is that more or less the question?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So that question could be asked even on other. There were other kings that were kings at a younger age, which we'll see later in the Book of Kings. The whole story of how the entire kingdom of David Hamelech was almost wiped out, except one child who was hidden, and ultimately he became king at a very young age. And the question would be, right, how would they have the ability to judge being like so young? Yehudis or Yisrael, did you want to answer that, or you have your own question?
No, but it's somewhat connected to Susan's question, and that is, I believe that we learned that that Shlomo HaMelech brought Kabbanos to the Bamos before he was 13, but if he were not bar
But he
mitzvah,
was already a king.
You're wondering if a child is allowed to bring a carbon. Seemingly not, right? That's what you're asking.
that's my question.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Now, I don't remember all the details, but we did learn a little about this in Chagiga, and about a child bringing a carbon. I'd have to look it up again because it's not fresh in my memory. Maybe Mordechai remembers a little about the beginning of Chagiga. Were you with us at the beginning of Chagiga, Mordechai? Do you remember that
Yeah, I
discussion?
was with you at the beginning of Hagiga, but I'm trying to remember it.
It's tough remembering every detail. We'll have to take a look. That's a good question, Yisrael. I'll have to think about that. About the sacrifice. I mean, it's not a, yeah, Ben, what would you like to say?
I like to say that if they say Shlomo brought korbanot, doesn't mean personally he did the work. It might have been a Cohen that did the work.
Which it definitely was, but the question is, right, maybe he had someone else be the
Right.
official, maybe it was officially from someone else's, one of his older, someone older than him, one of the advisors or so, and he said, listen, I'm not allowed to bring it, you bring it my place or something, you know, and so on. So there definitely are ways of bringing carbon, even if he's not allowed to. But we should take a look again. It's at the beginning of the Gemara Chagiga where we did have a little discussion about that. So we'll have to take a look there. Yes, David.
Maybe he brought it as in his role as a king and not as a private individual.
Which we would have to see what is the um does the fact that you're bringing it as the role of a king, does that allow you to bring it at an age that one is exempt? In other words, the fact that he's a king, does that make him now obligated in certain mitzvahs? Does that change his obligation or change his permission? That would be the question. In other words, if there was a uh, obligatory sacrifice, that would be one thing. So a king is obligated to bring a certain sacrifice every day. So if he's a king and he's a child, maybe that would be a case that you wouldn't have to look into the fact that he's a child because he has an obligation as a king, which possibly you could argue with that. But if you're going to say that these are all it would seem like these were sacrifices, all voluntary sacrifices. So being voluntary sacrifices, I don't know if there's any specific rule that a king would be, would cause him not to have to deal with the limitation of someone underage. You know what I mean? I don't know if being a king allows you to override the if there was a limitation of being under, if there's a problem of being underage. I don't know if being a king overrides that. But again, we'll have to take a look. So Mitzvah Hashem, for next week, I'll try to look into this about the Yisrael's question, underage. Now, about Susan's question about being underage and judging the Jewish people and not maybe having that level of maturity, which I think is also a very good question. Possibly, they didn't. The actual judgments, maybe they didn't really do until the age of bar mitzvah, and it was more of a advisors that were really the ones who were calling the shots. His advisors were really the ones that were helping run the country, and he was just the front, he was the official king. But it's almost like the Queen of England. She doesn't really, she passed away. But the way it's done in England is they don't really have much of a say. It's really there's a whole parliament that runs the show, and so it probably is something along those lines. I don't think you can expect the whole country to rely on the decision. It's sort of like the advisors are probably educating the king at that stage rather than allowing the king to make all these major decisions. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think Shlomo Melech felt the same way, that he is not ready to judge, and asked Hashem to give him the knowledge to judge the people.
So that takes us to a whole nother question, and that is that I did mention that there was a king that was king at a even younger age, I believe the age of 7, Hoash, but with Shlomo HaMelech, after he got the blessing from Hashem that he now is a Chacham and he is a Navin, does he now, even if he's underage, would he now be able to judge, being that the whole reason of being 13 is because a person doesn't have that maturity, but here God blessed him with that maturity, so now maybe he would be able to judge, even though under normal circumstances, and would he now be obligated in mitzvahs, being that he would have been given this blessing? I'm sorry, what did you say, Ben?
He did. He judged the 2 women.
Yeah, but we don't know if
right after that.
Right, but when is right after that? It could have been after his bar mitzvah. As it doesn't say the age. Again, I before you came, Ben, I went through a whole discussion of how old he is.
Yeah,
so you have
I
to
know
listen.
He was 12 when he
So
was
you'll have to
by King David.
You'll have to listen to the beginning of the class
Okay.
when I upload it. But we had a whole discussion of he was 12, but what stage is he now? What age is he now at this stage? There is room to say that he's still 12 right after he brought these sacrifices and he had this revelation. But then when did he turn 13? We don't know. But the other commentaries, and especially if you look at the chronological order of the verses, the way the story here, it does sound like he's already a few years after he began his reign. And according to that, he's after bar mitzvah. So again, we're trying to answer so it's not really such a proof, the fact that he judged these 2 women, because we don't know if he might be after bar mitzvah at that point. He might be already 13. Okay, so the verse that we are up to now is verse 13. Furthermore, so we're in chapter 3, verse 13. Furthermore, even that which you did not request, I have granted you. So Hashem is going to give Shlomo HaMelech even things that he didn't request. What is that? Even riches and honor all your days, such that there has never been any man among the kings like you. So now he uses the word all your days. Now, the word in the Hebrew, all your days, goes at the end of the verse. The way the translation here that I'm using, it puts the word all your days in the beginning, or in the middle of the verse, I should say. So again, let me read verse 13 once more. Furthermore, even that which you did not request, I have granted you, even riches and honor, all your days, such that there has never been any man among the kings like you. So all your days means that you will be rich and honored all of your days. That is one way of learning this, that you will never have a day of poverty in your life. You will be all your days, you will have riches and honor. Or you will never have, there will never be any other king like you with riches and honor. So that would be another way of reading it. And if you read it that way, again, we're trying to translate the Hebrew, and the problem is I'm reading it from the English, but really the proper way to read it would be to read the Hebrew. And in the Hebrew, there are two ways of reading this, and the Matudas David picks up on it, and he mentions both are possibilities of how it's supposed to be read. That again, if you look at the verse 13, so I've granted you. This would be like putting all your days at the end of the verse. So furthermore, even that which you did not request, I have granted you even riches and honor, such that there's never been any man among the kings like you, all of your days, that would have this type of level of wealth and riches and honor. So you will always be richer than all the other kings in you, but it's not emphasizing that you will be rich all the days of your life. It's emphasizing you compared to the other kings will always, that there will never be all the days of your life you will never there won't be anyone richer than you, which would mean that possibly after he passes away, there might be kings that will be richer than him. According to the first way we learned, he would be rich all his days, that there will never be any man among the kings that will be like you, which means no one will ever attain the wealth. No king will ever attain the wealth that King Solomon had. So that would be, that depends on how you're learning it. It ends up, gives us a little understanding of how wealthy Shlomo HaMelech was. Yes, David.
Yeah, that translation that you're saying is the way Mayam Loez translates it. Both wealth and honor, such that there has never been a single one like you among all the kings, all of your days.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you have both options. Yeah. Okay, Shkaya. Okay. Yes, Susan.
Oh, okay, you're saying riches, wealth. That could be wealth of mind. That doesn't necessarily have to be the material world.
So you got a good point. Not always does it mean material wealth.
Especially when he says there'll be never a king like you.
Well, that could mean material wealth.
But I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily mean that in the material world. It could be richness of mind.
So it seems that the richness of mind that you're referring to that was what he asked for. He wanted that wisdom, which you might call, I'm not sure the exact terms, richness of mind, but it's probably along those lines, is the wisdom that he asked for, and he was given that wisdom. And now we're jumping to what Hashem is happy to give him, even though he didn't ask for it. And it sounds like he's giving him what a regular person would have asked for. And he said, you didn't ask for these things. So, but you asked for something so much more valuable, but I'm going to throw it in as well on the house. And he gives him, seemingly he's giving him what you may consider to be less significant and not so important, but something that the regular people might have asked for. and Hashem is saying, I'm handing it to you as well on a silver platter.
Rabbi,
Yes, Moshe.
yeah, it's my understanding that the Mashiach will have to be very well-to-do. He's going to be very wealthy. This is what I heard in a shiur when I was living on the beach, that he's going to be very, very wealthy. Now, that probably sets the stage for the Davidic kingdom, that the kings following Shlomo HaMelech would be very well-to-do, because it's a lineage leading up to whatever we're heading into now, and Mashiach will be very wealthy. This is my understanding from what I heard in this shiur that I heard.
So there is a concept that a Kohen Gadol is a Kohen Gadol says if he's not wealthy, they would make him wealthy. And I'm not sure if the same law applies to a king. Does it say that? I mean, we could look it up in the Rambam if there is such a law that if he's not wealthy, they make him wealthy. I know that it says that by a Kohen Gadol, that if he's but you heard this clearly about Mashiach, right?
Yes.
Low battery.
So I guess then that's so that they would make him wealthy if he's not wealthy.
Anna has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just looking something up over here, just seeing if it says. Okay, yeah, I don't see any. What I do see here is that there's a Gemara that mentions about something earlier that I mentioned about Moshe Rabbeinu being called a king, which seems to be a contradiction to the Radak that I mentioned, where the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu is considered the Melech. So that's there is a source to that. Moshe and Yeshua are both called kings, and it's based on a Gemara in Zevachim, page 102. Chamesh simchos smachos haisa alisheva yisera al bnei Yisrael. And it says in Yushalmi Sanhedrin, Moshe's Melech, Navi, Melech and Navi. Aaron is Urim Tumim. So, and also on Yeshua it says that he's called a Melech. So that's an interesting source. Okay.
Rabbi, also, when we say Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, so
right.
it has to be connected with David HaMelech, because if that's the next following, that's what's going to lead to the upcoming Mashiach, then when you say David HaMelech, it has to be from the Davidic kingdom, I would assume, and therefore it has to be a king who will be very well to do.
Right. Okay. Anyway, very nice. Yes, Anna.
Yeah, I was going to go a little bit back in our discussion about the age of King Solomon. First of all, it was a dynasty. It was not an elected official. It was a dynasty that was transferred from the father to son. That's why the age is a little bit difficult to determine that way. It's a little bit different type of system. And we know, again, you mentioned the Queen of England, and she was 18 when she became a queen of huge country, and a woman. It's another kind of surprise. We know so many examples in Japan where emperor, his role could be transferred to a very young child. And I think it has to do with, first of all, amount of advisors that are available. In this case, it was not only David, King David's decision to, to make his youngest son king, but it was probably his opinion about other possibilities that could be in place. Plus, we know that prophet predicted it too. That so it was so many signs that even though at young age, this particular person was able of performing the necessary duties. Then,
so in other words, based on your on what you're saying, are you implying that even though maybe regularly we would never allow someone to judge, but because he was told that he's meant to be the king, David chose him to be the king, and this was meant from Hashem. So you're saying he would be an exception to the rule and be able to judge even at a young age? Or
yes,
are you saying that he was meant for the position, and when the time came, maybe they sort of like warmed him up for the position and held it for him, and he was there. He was the official king, but he was the front, and they still had advisors. Or, you know what I mean? Are you saying he actually judged
sure,
because of these signs?
Both. I believe it is. But because it is a dynasty and because it was a prediction that so many more, I don't remember, it was 25 more kings that came from this dynasty. That's why that was a very logical progression in what happened. And I believe that it was definitely an exceptional child. And, from my teaching experience, it is a big difference. The age is not necessarily a sign of maturity. And another opinion is that sometimes a child's mind that is not corrupted with so many different experiences can be the pure and can be the best. We know that too. That's why there are so many.
Well, he had a very tough life. I mean, he had murder in his family a lot of times.
Right.
So I don't know if you could say, he didn't come from exactly the best, background. No, you can't really say he never suffered from any childhood memories. He had numerous.
We judge from his future action, and we see how humane and kind and peaceful he was in his decisions, which was probably.
And it said that a child huge.
What?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's coming from.
To tell something anyway, and the second kind of idea about wealth, I don't think that it's really a matter of how much money or gold or whatever assets a person has. And I believe that I read somewhere that for a Jew to be wealthy, give a person an opportunity to do good deeds and to help, to give tzedakah, and to do, not maybe to be so preoccupied of making the wealth or collecting or receiving it as a result of war. That's why I believe that wealth in many cases, definitely a wealth of wisdom and knowledge and intelligence, is extremely important. But just to be free from everyday worries, if we have enough money for the country to feed people and to support the army or something like that, that gives a really more opportunities and time to divide your attention to something important. I truly believe that in this time and life that we live right now, it's a very similar situation. A wealthy countries have a chance to do more goods. That's
so what you're saying is along the lines of what Susan wanted to say, that wealth doesn't necessarily mean just financial wealth, but in this scenario of where he was blessed with the wealth of wisdom and all the other wealths, it would seem that this is a very practical, material wealth. It's not talking about the wealth that you're referring to.
Yes,
and as far as I understand,
it gives him a chance to be one of the few kings that had a peaceful time of their, to rule the country. That's the most important thing, I believe. They don't have to
Right.
worry about wars.
Right. Well,
Anyway.
he didn't ask for that, the wealth. So obviously it
Mhm.
wasn't so significant, as you're saying. Now, as you're saying, the wealth itself is not necessarily so significant, but God
Right.
blessed him with it as a little cherry on top.
Right,
But
right.
thank
And
you. Okay, yes.
helped him a lot. Okay.
Right. I'm sure it did. Yeah. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes, I remember at least at one time, Elul's first class was called King David class, and business class was called King Solomon class, which I found a bit strange because Shlomo HaMelech was richer than David.
That's an interesting little point over there, a little trivia. Okay, very nice. Thank you, Mordechai, for sharing that. It's a historical fact. That's an interesting thought. How about the hotels in Israel? I think the King David hotel is a lot more expensive than the King Solomon hotel. If you think about it that way. No, am I right, Ben? King
Well,
David is like for the
I don't know King Solomon's hotel, but I know King David is expensive.
yes. So
And
that's
it's
another
an old one. It's an old one.
yeah, yeah. So that would be along the same lines, Mordechai. All right. Anyway, let's continue. So we have this gift that Hashem gave Shlomo HaMelech, the gift Hashem gave him, even though he didn't ask for it, and that was it's unconditional. All the days of all your days, you will have this. And then in verse 14, and look at the contrast over here to verse 14 from the previous verse. In verse 14, if you walk in my ways, observing my decrees and commandments as your father David walked, I shall prolong your days. Now look at that, how it's worded. You see the wording very different. Here it's if you walk in my ways, then you will be able to have the longevity. But if you don't, you're not getting that. The other blessings he was getting no matter what. It was unconditional. But this is conditional. And the reason why it's conditional is because in the Torah, Hashem wrote it in a conditional way. And this is what the commentaries bring, that in Deuteronomy 17 says, if you, that by a king, in order to have long life, longevity, yarech yamim al mamlachtoi, that's as long as you don't go away from my commandments. So it talks about the laws of the king, and it mentions clearly that only on the condition that you don't go away, you turn away from my commandments. If you turn away from my commandments, then forget it. Now, Shlomo HaMelech now wakes up in verse 15. Let's see. Verse 15, Shlomo awoke, and behold, it had been a dream. This is the Haftarah for Parshas Miketz, where we talk about in the portion of Miketz, it mentions the beginning over there where Pharaoh had a dream, and he woke up, and then he had another dream with the cows and the ears of corn, the ears of grain. So here Solomon awoke, and behold, it had been a dream. When he came to Jerusalem, he stood before the ark of the covenant of Hashem and brought up elevation offerings and offered peace offerings, made a feast for all his servants. So here he's so excited about what just happened. Now, what was he so excited about? That he had a dream?
What's in the dream?
What was the dream? That he's going to be blessed with all these things. So the commentaries mention, they quote that that Shlomo HaMelech saw the dream come true already. How did he see the dream come true already? Because he heard the birds chirping, and he understood what they were saying. He heard the animals making sounds, and he understood what the animals were saying. So he realized that this was not just a regular dream. This was real. This was true. And that's when he he was sure that this is not just a dream. It was the reality. It was a fact. It was a prophecy, and he or some level of revelation, and so he made this party, knowing based on the fact that he knew that this dream was a true dream. And in verse 16, and he brought offerings and everything. And where is he doing this? In Jerusalem, because in Jerusalem there was also a holy place, and that was the altar. The ark was there, so they had an altar near the ark. So these are the two main. The main altar, of course, was in Givon. That was the place of what we would call the Mishkan, divine presence, the big Bama Gedola, the main altar. But in Yerushalayim, that's where he had the ark, and there was near the ark there was a altar that Shlomo Melech chose to use to bring all his sacrifices. And now comes the story of the two women. And this is in verse 16. So now he's judging he's going to be judging the Jewish people. Then two women innkeepers came to the king and stood before him. So the Hebrew word is zoinos, but the commentaries don't seem to talk about it. We did have the word zoinos before when it talked about Rachav. Rachav was the zoina who ended up marrying Joshua, and she hosted the two spies that Joshua had sent. Joshua sent two spies, Pinchas and Kalev, to check out the Jericho, and they arrived there at Rachav the Zoina's house. Now, Zoina normally means a prostitute, but Zoina also has the word of mazon, provides food or has some type of a inn or some type of a convenience store type of thing. So the translation here is these two women, innkeepers, came to the king and stood before him. One woman said, please, my master, my lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I gave birth while with her in the house. Verse 18, on the third day after I gave birth, this woman gave birth as well. We were together. There was no outsider with us in the house. Only the two of us were in the house. The son of this woman died at night because she lay upon him. She arose during the night, took my son from my side while your maidservant was asleep, meaning while I was sleeping, and laid him in her bosom, and her dead son she laid in my bosom. When I arose in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. When I studied him in the morning, behold, it was not the son to whom I had given birth. So this is the story where these two women living together, and they both had a child. Doesn't really tell us much about the rest of the story, where their husbands and so on. But basically, one of the women, she must have suffocated the newborn baby. And the other one, seems like the babies were 3 days apart, age. Third day after one gave birth, the other woman gave birth. And anyway, so one of the babies was suffocated, and from his mother, and the one of the mothers, and basically the woman whose baby didn't die, at least says that the other woman switched the babies, put the suffocated baby by her, and she took the live baby. Now, the other woman is going to argue back, verse 22, but the other woman said, "It is not so. My son is the live one, and your son is the dead one." So I didn't do anything, she's claiming. Mine is the live one. But this one said, "It is not so. Your son is the dead one, and my son is the live one." And they went on speaking before the king. It sounds like they repeated themselves, to emphasize their claim. So the king, verse 23, the king said, "This one claims, this is my son who is alive, and your son is the dead one. And this one claims it is not so. Your son is the dead one, and my son is the live one." So he repeats their claims to show them that he understands the case well. It's a problem that a lot of times judge doesn't really understand the case. And here in Jewish law, it's brought down in Gemara that a judge is supposed to do this to make sure that it's he shows the defendant and the prosecutor, the litigants, that he understands what they're saying. So he repeats the claims and the counterclaims in order for there to be an understanding that or in order to make sure that he does understand it. And if it's not so, they will correct him. Now, the verse continues and says, verse 24, so the king said, "Fetch me a sword." And they brought a sword before the king. And he's building up their anxiety. What is he going to be doing with this sword? In verse 25, the king said, "Cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other." In verse 26, the woman whose son was the live one spoke to the king because her compassion was aroused for her son. And she said, "Please, my lord, give her the living newborn and do not put it to death." But the other one said, "Neither mine nor yours shall he be cut." Now, how could a woman have said such a crazy statement? She wants the other. She thinks that this is if it's her baby, she's willing to have the baby cut. Does that make sense? It was clear, so clear as day, that this is not the mother. And the only reason she could have said such a foolish thing was because her main goal was that she didn't want that the other woman would have a live child. And so she didn't really care to have the live child herself because it's not hers. She was just holding the baby so that she's not the one with the dead child. And but she couldn't handle the fact that the other woman would be getting all the happiness and so on, while she is suffering. So therefore, she, so the truth came out that she really was not the mother, and she didn't want this child. She only didn't want that the other woman would have the joy, and basically it would make it sad for her. So the king spoke up and said, "Give her the first one, the living newborn, and do not put it to death. She is his mother." All Israel heard the judgment that the king rendered, and they were in awe of the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was within him to do justice. What the meaning of this is, now this is obvious. You would think, like, you don't need King Solomon to come to know who's the mother. But what you did need King Solomon was to come up with this way of testing. And this is, at least one of the commentaries mentions this. One of the Rosh Hashivas, Chaim Shmulevitz, brings this in his Sefer, that what the wisdom of Shlomo was not that he knew who the mother was that he was able to come up with this question, with this little trick of making it clear who the mother was and making it reveal. Okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, you're welcome.